Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Today is Tuesday, June 7th. We'll begin this evening by an invocation by Minister David Miller of Triad Church of Christ.
Let us pray. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day that you've blessed us with, and we thank you, Father, for all the blessings of this life. Father, we thank you for this town council that's meeting tonight. We pray, Father, for the men and the women that are here. We pray, God, that you'd bless them and help them, Father, to consider each item of business carefully and treat it with integrity and respect and honor, Father. Father, we also pray for those individuals here that have come to pursue various business opportunities and various business, Father, that they want to bring before this council tonight. We pray, Lord, that they will be properly heard. We pray, Father, that their concerns and their issues might be treated fairly and with full attention. God, we thank you for this town. We thank you, Father, for the responsible leadership that we've had for some time. We pray, Father, that you might continue to bless us with leaders within our community. We pray, Father, that you would help us to also teach this next generation, Father, their civic responsibilities and duties as well. God, I pray that you'd be with each man and woman here tonight. And I pray, Lord, that you would bless them. And I pray, God, that you might keep all of us safe and give all of us a safe return home when the business is closed tonight. For it's in Christ Jesus' name we pray, and amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Thank you. You may be seated. It's my honor as mayor and on behalf of this board to recognize significant occasions in our community, special events, significant accomplishments of people. They can be recognitions of a national observance, a statewide observance, or a local observance. And we have a local observance that we have had for several years now for water safety awareness at the beginning of the summer. So I'd like to at this time recognize Brittany Cool, who is working with Safe Swim, and present this to her. Brittany, if you could come forward. So with streaming, I have to carry a microphone around or no one can hear me if they're watching, which is really inconvenient because in the room everyone can hear me just fine. But at any rate, but this is good because Darlene can watch, right? So a shout out to Darlene Haskins and the others who are involved in water safety awareness, infant swim lessons, and to Ryan as well, and general awareness of water safety and prevention of drownings. And that's something that Brittany has been involved with in working with Safe Swim and hand-in-hand water safety. So whereas the citizens of Kernersville recognize that water-related activities are an important part of fun for adults and children and also offer physical health benefits, and whereas water-related activities carry an inherent risk of drowning and other risks for accidents and injuries, and whereas water safety education plays an important role in minimizing these risks, especially in late May and early June at the beginning of the summer swim season, and whereas community organizations, swim lessons, and community awareness efforts provide opportunities for water safety education to prevent drowning and other accidents or injuries. Now, therefore, I, Dawn Morgan, as mayor of the town of Kernersville, do proclaim this month Water Safety Awareness Month in the town of Kernersville, North Carolina, and urge all citizens to support efforts to promote water safety education and awareness in our community in the summer months and throughout the year. And I've dated this to include the gala that you did for fundraising for scholarships for helping children learn how to swim and into the early summer, so we can all be aware of the importance of water safety. Would you like to say a few words?
Sure. I just want to thank you because water safety is so important. As Darlene loves to tell people, my son, he had a non-fatal drowning at age 3. So that is why it is so important to me. He can now swim in 10 feet of water with no problem. That is our biggest goal, is to have children able to go into water and swim with confidence and know the dangers of water.
Thank you very much. And here is the recognition, and I appreciate your efforts to inform other parents to prevent tragedy in our community. I'm very proud of your son and what he's accomplished. And it can happen in an instant, and you can be right there. The children need to know what to do in the pool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back to our agenda, to our public hearings. The public hearing procedures printed on the agenda, many of you in the room are familiar with it, but I'll review it briefly. When an agenda item is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending shall be permitted to address the Board of Aldermen regarding the item under consideration, those speaking in favor speaking first and those against speaking second. Proponents and opponents shall each be given 20 minutes of time to speak and may choose to allow one speaker to utilize that time or choose to allocate the time amongst different speakers. In the event that either proponents or opponents have not designated a speaker or speakers to represent that view, the mayor shall divide the 20 minutes by the number of speakers wishing to address the Board of Aldermen. And each such speaker shall be allowed that given time within which to express his or her comments, ideas, concerns, and expressions. After the opponents speak, the mayor will allow the proponents 5 minutes for rebuttal. If the proponents choose to exercise this option, the opponents will also have 5 minutes for rebuttal. In the event the proponents do not present a rebuttal, then the opponents shall be given no further time to speak. So we've got 3 public hearings, and then we have a public session. So the public session, the rules are a little bit different. There's 15 minutes total allocated to that item for comments. So if you'd like to speak on a public hearing item, it's 20 minutes for each point of view. If you'd like to speak on a public session item, it's 15 minutes altogether. In either event, you fill out an agenda speaker card, and if you could give it to our town attorney and town manager sitting here at this front table, they'll convey it to the town clerk and to me. Let's see. In public session items and in public hearing items, as many of you are aware, the board can ask people questions as they desire. All right, so we're beginning with item 1A, which is a public hearing on a rezoning. Justin Love, agent for George Gibson, owner, requesting a general use rezoning for LIS to GB, which is general business, for property located at 602 Fairview Street, containing a total of 0.52 plus or minus acres. All general business uses apply. Zoning docket K800, and consideration of an ordinance rezoning said property. We'll begin with a presentation by our Community Development Department. We have here our director, Catherine Garner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The first case tonight is K800. This is a general use rezoning at 602 Fairview Street. The existing zoning is limited industrial special use. The uses that were restricted on that rezoning were manufacturing, A and B, and professional offices only. The proposed zoning under consideration tonight is general business. There is no conditional aspect to this rezoning. So conditional use rezonings are what you see most often and are probably what you're most familiar with. Those require the preparation of a site plan at the time of application submittal, and they allow this board to apply conditions, including the limitation of uses. With the general use rezoning, the applicant is not required to prepare a site plan and submit it with the rezoning application, and all uses within the zoning district must be considered. There's no opportunity to limit uses. And because we're considering all the uses, the applicant's intended use is not a factor in the decision. It does not allow for conditions to be applied, but all UDO regulations still apply. When an applicant comes to us and is deciding that they want to rezone a property, we do coach them through, okay, here are your options. These are the pros and cons of each one. And so each applicant makes the decision of how they choose to apply. In this case, the applicant has chosen the general use rezoning option. So the purpose of the rezoning petition is to remove the previous conditions that were adopted with the 1996 rezoning. Most have already been fulfilled and they related to the development of the site. The others remaining were the specific uses. So the applicant is requesting to remove those use restrictions. This would allow flexibility in future use options for the property owner. Should this business relocate to another location, he would have more opportunities to rent to another commercial tenant. All general business uses must be considered as part of the rezoning, but the site is located within a highway corridor overlay district, which does restrict some uses. So in the staff report and on the screen, we have gone ahead and stricken the ones that would be prevented by the highway corridor overlay district use restrictions. So there are still a lot of options. There are certain conditions that apply to some of the options of uses in general business. But these are the full suite of uses that would be permitted by right. Surrounding zoning includes residential to the north, west, and south, and commercial and industrial uses to the east. So the gold colors, the RS7 and RS12 on the map, and then this purple is RSQ. And then to the east, there is some residential multifamily 18 and RM18S. General industrial, highway business, and general business both are very close to the property along Pine View. The site is designated as industrial in the land use plan. The development plan and the land use plan describe industrial as areas established to provide for office, distribution, and manufacturing uses. The pink on the map next to this site is designated as mixed use, and many of the surrounding areas are designated as different types of residential, but the site stands alone as an industrial land use plan. For industrial, we're not proposing a land use plan amendment with this application. We feel that general business is appropriate for an industrial designation in the land use plan. So again, all allowed uses will continue to be commercial. There are some residential options that are permitted in general business, but all the general business uses would apply. The proposed rezoning would remove any remaining conditions from the previous rezoning, the LIS, and add flexibility to the allowable uses. The general use rezoning requires all uses to be considered. Planning board, staff's recommendation was to approve the request, finding that the Unified Development Ordinance intends general business to accommodate a wide variety of retail service and office uses along thoroughfares. The property is located in the Highway Corridor Overlay District, which is intended to enhance the business economy and create attractive commercial areas, and the GB zoning would be conducive to adaptive reuse of existing structures or other infill projects. This motion was made by planning board or a member of planning board, but it failed with a vote of 3-5. 3-4, there's a typo. Jim Waddell was absent, as well as Mr. Fredenberg. So the motion died after the vote. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
This is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. I have signed up to speak in favor G.W. Gibson, Justin Love, and Danny Hill. So whoever would like to speak first.
Hello, my name is G.W. Gibson. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Alderman. And I want to thank my family for being here to support me or laugh at me. I'm not sure which. But this is hard for me to do. I'm a welder fabricator. I'm not a speaker, so please excuse me if I mess up here. My wife and I live at 1150 Old Salem Road. We've lived there for almost 50 years. I have 3 sons and 5 grandsons. 2 of my sons and 4 of my grandsons, they live here in Kernersville. I started my ironwork business in 1985. We built a shop at 602 Fairview Street in 1996. I built custom ironwork such as the Arbor, the Phoenix building uptown, and At the St. Paul's Historical Cemetery, I built the gates and the custom wrought iron fencing. That's why our business was on when I built the building for manufacturing. My wife and I retired in 2013. The building was empty for 2 years before I could rent it, finding somebody to go into current zoning. I have a man named Justin Love from Thomasville who owns Shields Windshield Glass and Replacement. He has agreed and has signed a 5-year lease with me and a 2-year option if we can get this rezoned. Plus, he wants to move his family from Thomasville to Kernersville. Under the general business, it just, there's a lot of things under there that would not fit in our building. We have 7 parking spaces, and the building is not air conditioned, and it'll work fine for like Justin and his auto glass. It'd work fine for a plumbing supply house or a electrical supply house. We had one of the problems I think I had at the planning board meeting, we did not speak, and I wish I had. I had a neighbor, Rick Gunner, whose home and business at K Vegas Nuts is behind our property. Rick pointed out that we had a terrible renter who used foul language where his family could hear it. We did not know this happened until the renter was gone. We apologize again to you, Rick. The renter lied to the town to get a permit to get in that building. He lied and stole from me. He damaged the inside of my building. I got him out after 9 months, sooner if I could have. I have talked to Rick, the neighbor, a few times since the meeting, and Rick said he would speak in favor of us tonight. Some of the general business list, there's no way that would work in our building, a nightclub, a drive-through restaurant. It's just a lot of things that will not work because of the parking. It's not air conditioned, and again, it only has 7 parking spaces. And the final thing is the town has to issue a permit for ever who goes in that building. And on that, I just want to thank all of you in taking deep consideration that ever who goes in that building, I promise you that I will thoroughly check them out. I mean, that's all I can do. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Justin Lowe?
Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you, GW, for that. And so my name is Justin Love. I'm a proud owner of Shields Auto Glass. We've been in business for about 1.5 years now. I've been in the industry for about 17 years. And we're looking to branch out or start our shop here in Kernersville, central location between Winston and Greensboro. With the newer vehicles out, there's cameras that has to be recalibrated. For those windshields to be recalibrated, you have to be in a controlled environment to do so. We started out and, excuse me, and had no intentions on having the shop this quickly. So we were 100% mobile, and we've got 3 vans now, 4 employees, and we're growing faster than we thought we were. And we just think this would be a great location for an auto glass shop.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Danny?
Yes, my name is Danny Hill. I'm with Allied Commercial Realty. We represent Mr. Gibson. Chris France is not able to be here tonight, but he's the listing agent, and then I'm the leasing agent representing Justin. And we've had some issues over the past trying to find somebody that would work within the current zoning. So we would appreciate your consideration to allow Justin. He's got a good, clean business, great young man, and we'd like to see them go in there. If you have any questions, by my voice is kind of gone. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor? Please come forward. If you could say your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Gunner. Me and my wife Robin live at 603 Salisbury Street here in Kernersville. Been here since August of 2013, and we love the town, the people. I previously expressed my concerns for this rezoning application. Kind of a knee-jerk reaction, as Mr. Gibson had said. The previous tenant to the building there was less than desired kind of neighbor, and I know that Mr. Gibson wasn't aware of this individual's demeanor or his subjective or whatever before allowing him to move in there. And I've got a lot of admiration for Mr. Gibson. I don't know Mr. Love that good, but I do believe his business will do well here in Kernersville. I don't know of other businesses in the same category or the same field. I see the property improvements going in place in progress for this to be passed or whatever, and I have no objections. Like I say, when I looked at I've spoke with the Corey, I can't remember the guy's name over at the zoning office, and we pulled up and I was able to print on my own the UOB document, and looking at it, there's so many guidelines and ordinances and everything else that kind of couple or go together with. I just broke the veneer off here, but it fell anyway. But anyway, there's a lot of things, like some of the things, the previous concerns that were mentioned in the other meeting. There was other, like a nightclub was mentioned or whatever. I think there's another stipulation in that says there can't be one within 300 feet of a residential establishment or a home. So there's a lot of things that are covered more ways than one, and I have no objection to this going through. I have no objection whatsoever, and I appreciate these neighbors expressing to me their regrets for the previous tenant and my approval for what they're trying to do here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rick. All right, is there anyone else here in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here in opposition? Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Does the board have any questions, discussion, or is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the rezoning be approved to general use.
Okay. I have a motion by Alderman Penix. Do I have a second? Second by Mayor Pro Tem Apple. All in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Congratulations. Okay. Moving on, we have item 1B. It's a public hearing text amendment. Curtis Fisher, agent for the town of Kernersville, for proposed zoning text amendment to the UDO amending Chapter C Environmental Ordinance. Amendments addressing high-density development standards, zoning docket KT 269. Ms. Gardner?
KT 269 affects Chapter C, Article 3, Section 3-5. The entire section was reorganized and reworded for clarity and to delete some duplications and just clean up some messy text. But the purpose is also to clarify the impervious coverage allowed by the developer of a site and reserve some impervious coverage allowance for the sole use of the property owner. We have run into the situation with residential developments where the developer or the builder maxes out the total amount of square footage on a site, and then the new homeowner comes in to get a permit for a patio or a small driveway expansion or an accessory structure, and we have to tell them, we're so sorry, you have no impervious coverage allowed for that. So this would require developers to reserve the 300 square feet so that homeowners can make modifications to their property at a future time. So this is the new ordinance as it's been rewritten. This was included in your packet. Again, mostly it's just reworded for clarity to delete duplications. And then item G is the addition of that 300 square feet. Planning board and staff do recommend approval of the text amendment as presented, and it received a unanimous vote at planning board.
Thank you, Ms. Garner. This is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed.
Madam Mayor, I'll be pleased to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of staff and that we approve the amendment as proposed in the documents in the agenda.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Apple. Do I have a second?
Second.
Can't tell if that was Chris or JR.
Chris.
Second by Alderman Chris Thompson. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, we are to item 1C, which is public hearing on the budget. Our presentation will be by our town manager, Curtis Swisher. For everyone in attendance, the town budget is something that is worked on very diligently throughout the year, with intensive effort starting in January to plan for the upcoming budget. Our fiscal year for the Scouts here runs from July 1st to June 30th, and so state law requires us to adopt a balanced budget. Yes, a balanced budget by June 30th of every year to fund the operations of the town in the upcoming year. So the town budget encompasses many of the town, all of the town departments, and sets some of the policy goals for the town by funding those policy objectives. And with that, Mr. Swisher, if you could present what you have.
Madam Mayor and Board, I have a short presentation tonight, shorter than it normally is for the public hearing. But as you all know, we had the budget workshop last week. It's been on YouTube on the town's page now for a week, and it went into much more detail so that folks could go back and see that. So I've cut my presentation tonight pretty much just to the basics. For those that haven't seen the budget workshop, they'll still have an idea of where we are with the budget this year. The proposed budget is $43,200,846. That is about $3 million more than the budget for fiscal year 21-22. The reason being is that we put in the Beeson's Crossroads fire station renovations in this year's budget. They were in last year's budget, but as I told the board, they were in last year's budget just as a lease payment. Our initial deal with Beeson's is that they would do the renovations and we would make the payments on the loan. That didn't work out, so now we will be doing the renovations, and so that $3 million is in there, but the only thing that impacts the budget is still that payment of about $270,000 a year. The tax rate, we're proposing 55.9 cents per $100 valuation. That is the current tax rate that was set last year through the revaluation, and so we're not recommending a change to the tax rate. I'm sorry, you can see our projected tax base for fiscal year 21-22, the year that we're currently in. Tax base is $3,662,604,000. We're projecting an increase in the tax base almost to $4 billion, not quite, $3,971,013. And the tax base, that takes into account all buildings, everything on the ground, all of your personal property on the ground, all your real property. This also includes the vehicles in this tax, the tax base. As you can see, the biggest increase in the tax base was in Guilford County. Guilford County had a property tax revaluation this year. So a lot of the property that we had in Guilford County received a new property tax value. And really, for those that aren't familiar, Kernersville does have some property in Guilford County. It mainly starts where FedEx ground hub is located and goes east. So FedEx, Amazon, all those folks, they're in Guilford County, but they are in the town limits of Kernersville. So we receive that tax base and the tax revenue from those folks. We are not recommending a revenue neutral tax rate this year based on Guilford County, primarily because they got it last year when we did the tax revaluation and lowered the tax rate for those folks in Forsyth County, the Kernersville residents and businesses in Forsyth County. The Guilford County folks also, they had their tax rate lowered because of that. We can't have two separate tax rates. So whatever we lower the tax rate to for one part of the county, the other also receives that. So what are we recommending this year expenditure-wise in the budget? It's obviously not all the expenditures that we're recommending, but I'm not getting into all of the line items. That again, you can see that from the presentation last week. We are recommending some changes for salaries and benefits. The biggest of those is a 6% cost of living adjustment. That's more than what we normally recommend. It normally is around 2 to 3%. We're recommending 6% this year because of the average inflation is a little bit over 8%. So 6%, it won't quite keep up with the inflation, but it will get us a little bit closer. Well, no increased contribution to 401k. We're recommending leaving it at 2%. And the pay study and developmental pay for this year is in the police department. Most of those folks will receive an increase of 2 pay grades for most of the employees in the department. We are recommending 4 new positions. 3 of those are in the fire department. We're recommending 3 full-time firefighters. That is 1 per shift. It's hard to hire just 1 because then you have 2 shifts that are out of line with the other. We recommend that those 3 positions starting in January of 2023. We're also recommending a GIS analyst that will start in January of 2023. That position will be housed in IT, but it will support all town departments with the GIS functions. We do have some new equipment being recommended, not as much. If you noticed, our loans for installment purchases this year, it was down about $1.5 million from last year, somewhere in that range. That indicates that we bought about $1.5 million less equipment this year as compared to last year. Most of this equipment is replacement equipment, and when we replace old equipment or when we replace equipment, we do it when it's basically reached the end of its useful life. It costs more to keep it up than what it's worth, things of that nature. In the IT department, we're recommending 25 new computers. We try to rotate out computers. As you can imagine, we've got 270 employees. So if we replace 25 computers a year, it takes us several years to get all the computers replaced. Recommending 10 new networking switches. Those are the switches that run our whole IT system here at Town Hall. And we're recommending a Wi-Fi upgrade. There's different areas of Town Hall, different buildings and so forth that the town owns where the Wi-Fi is not as good as it is in other areas. For instance, in Town Hall itself, there's some areas that's a little faster than others, a little bit weaker in some areas. So we're recommending an upgrade trying to have all the areas up, the same speed. Police department, we're recommending replacing 4 patrol vehicles. We have about 70 patrol vehicles. We've got 70 officers. We have about 70 vehicles. If we replace 4 or 5 a year, that's somewhere between 12 and 15 years before we get them all replaced. So what we do is we take the worst ones every year, the ones that have the most miles on them, the ones that have the most mechanical problems, the ones that are the oldest, and we replace those out. We've still got some in our fleet now that are right around 14 or 15 years old. They still run, but they're causing more issues at this point than what it's worth. So we replace those. We're recommending 1 new SRO vehicle. That's per our contract with the county. They pay us basically in our contract for that vehicle. Parks and Recreation Department, they currently have 1 staff vehicle. This is not the vehicles in their maintenance department, but this is the vehicles actually over at Parks and Rec. They've got 1 staff vehicle, probably about 8 to 10 individuals in the admin portion of that department. It's getting used a lot, so it's kind of tough. We're having them use their own vehicles and everything else during the day. Other equipment we're recommending, public services. This is probably the big one in the budget. We're recommending resurfacing of town streets, $1.5 million going toward resurfacing. they did the pavement condition rating report back in either February or March, indicated that we needed about $2 million a year in resurfacing. You can see it's a little bit less than that, but we think $1.5 million, if we can keep that for the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully we'll make a good dent in some of the roads that we need to resurface. Public services in the solid waste division, automated refuse truck. This truck was actually approved by the previous board. It was ordered. It will not be in until 22, 23. If it comes in before June 30th, we'll pay for it out of this year's budget. If not, it'll roll over into this budget for fiscal year 22, 23. Fire rescue department, we're replacing a staff vehicle in there, whether it be one for the bat chief or safety captains. We'll make that determination at a later date. Where it's time to start replacing the portable radios, just like everything else, they have a life for those radios. At a certain point in time, the manufacturer, Motorola, will no longer support the radios, which means if something happens to the radio, you can't get parts for it, can't fix it, things like that. So we're starting, it'll be a 3-year cycle. We'll replace 16 radios a year. So this is the first of those 16. Video conferencing systems, that's the systems we'll put in, one in each station, that will allow the firefighters and admin at those stations to video conference back and forth for training and so forth with other stations in Kernersville, other departments as well if they have the same system. And it will save our folks from having to go from one station over to another and save us some time and travel from having to go from Kernersville to another location. Fire alerting system and a security system. We have those currently in several of our other stations, in 2 stations or 3 stations, and this is recommended for the remaining stations. So to wrap it up, this is the tax rate of surrounding municipalities. You always hear that Kernersville has the highest tax rate of anybody around. I will tell you that depends on what you're comparing. When you compare apples to apples, Kernersville actually has one of the lower tax rates of anybody around. Now, does that mean that we have a lower tax rate than Rural Hall, King, Walkertown, those folks? No, but when you look at all the full service municipalities, and by that, we offer police, fire, public services, parks and rec, community development, inspections, IT, we offer all of those. When you compare us to other municipalities that offer the same thing, you can see that in this list of folks, it ranges from 73.9 cents being the highest, that is Reedsville, all the way down to 55.9, that's being Kernersville. And I tried to pick up municipalities around us that offer the same services and do that comparison. So as you can see, we're, the next closest one right now is Burlington at 59.73. These were the tax rates for last year. I don't know what they're proposing for this year. I do know that Winston, according to newspaper, Winston is proposing a tax increase of about 2 cents. Guilford County and Greensboro, they're not proposing a tax increase, but they had a revaluation, which means that, they could lower their tax rate by about 11 cents, but both of them have indicated that they're leaving the tax rate where it currently is. So that'll be a pretty good increase for some of the folks in Guilford or Greensboro. The rest of them, I don't know exactly, this is what it was last year. I don't know what they've approved this year in their budget. Not everybody's approved their budget yet. So, but I feel confident we'll still be somewhere along the lower end of that list as far as our tax rate compared to others. So that's all I had. I'll be glad to answer any questions that anyone may have. You each have the budget ordinance in front of you. If you so desire to adopt the budget tonight as presented, you can do that. If you do not desire to do that, if you have some changes you would like to add make to the budget, we can do that and then adopt the budget at one of the upcoming 2 meetings along toward the end of this month.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swisher. This is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to the proposed 2022-2023 fiscal year budget for the town of Kernersville? I'll call again. Is there anyone who'd like to come forward and speak as to things they like or dislike about the fiscal year 2022-2023 proposed budget for the town of Kernersville? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Mr. Swisher, is there a list of nonprofits that are being funded in this budget that might need to be reviewed as to whether or not aldermen can vote on the various fundings?
There's a list, and to my knowledge, we only currently have one alderman on the board that serves on any of the nonprofit boards. And what the mayor is referring to is they changed the general statute in January that says if an elected official currently sits on the board of a nonprofit agency, then they have to recuse themselves from voting on a contract that awards money to that agency. Budget, it's questionable whether the budget is a contract or not, but to be on the safe side, I would recommend either, if the board wants to adopt it tonight, even if it's next week and the alderman is still on the board, or 2 weeks from now, you can do it one of two ways. That alderman can recuse themselves and not vote on the budget at all. They can express whether they're satisfied with the budget, not satisfied with the budget. They can discuss it, but they can't vote on it. Or the board could make the motion to adopt the budget ordinance with the exception of the amount for governing body, because that is the department that the nonprofits are funded through. So they could vote on the budget ordinance with the exception of the governing body amount in that ordinance, which is about $952,000. Then that could be either approved or denied by the entire board, and then they could go back and vote on the amount of funding for governing body, and the alderman that sits on the nonprofits could recuse themselves from that.
Do you have a document in front of us that could be voted on that allows for those possibilities?
You have the budget ordinance in front of you that states everything, and I probably need to ask a finance individual. We can do it that way, can't we, Samuel? And then go back and vote on the governing body after that. Okay, so you have the ordinance in front of you. Governing body, the total budget is $43,200,846. Section 1 states the general fund, and Catherine may be able to pull it up. Section 2 states the general fund, and it lists out each department. And you'll see at the top of that, governing body is $952,305. So my recommendation, if you want to vote on it tonight, is you can make a motion to approve the budget ordinance as submitted, with the exception of the governing body at $952,305. The entire board could vote on that. Then they could go back and make the motion to include governing body in the budget ordinance for $952,305. And the one alderman that is on a nonprofit could recuse themselves and not vote on that section of it.
Okay, is there any comments or questions or compliments or issues you see with the budget as proposed? We'll start with that. Go ahead.
I have a comment. You were talking about the governing body. I have a problem with the amount you have listed for the Salvation Army. I think I made that clear to the board. I'm not be in favor of voting for that. So whatever you got to do to get around that.
Madam Mayor, I have just 2 or 3 questions, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Apple.
Okay. We've heard a lot of conversation, not only during the campaign, but as we've considered various rezoning requests, particularly those that have added some of the higher intensity, higher density residential properties. A lot of the conversation has tracked along the lines of, I wouldn't be in favor of expanding the number of subdivisions that we approve to be built without the roads being expanded to accommodate the additional traffic that that's going to cause. Could you address just a little bit? I have two questions. The first being, Curtis, can you explain for purposes of those here tonight and those watching what the process is as far as involvement of DOT in building roads to accommodate development? And is there provision within the budget that does that works with that?
I guess to start with, there's not a provision in the budget because the town we don't build a lot of roads. We've not constructed a lot of roads in the past. Most of those are built by the developer as internal roads. Most of the roads outside of those internal roads are DOT roads. Now, there are quite a few town roads that are obviously up to the town to improve or whatever it might be. A lot of times we require the developer to contribute to those improvements, and we have done that through the years. I will tell you that it's unfortunate that DOT's process for the most part is they don't look ahead, so to speak. They're not real proactive. They're more reactive, meaning that DOT will not undertake road improvements, stoplights, stop signs, any of that sort of thing until a road is already at or beyond capacity. So, DOT will, when the road's designed and when it's built, and I think a lot of the problem is the roads can handle a lot more capacity than what the citizens see the roads currently handling. For instance, you may get a group of citizens, and you all have seen it in the short time you've been on the board, that say, we saw it with Kerner Road, the project there at Old Valley School Road and Little Springs, or Dean Road. Traffic's terrible. Well, that road is designed to handle about double the cars that it's currently handling. It's a lot of traffic now, but it's still not going to be at capacity. So DOT's determination in when a road is at capacity is a lot different than when a citizen's determination that a road is at capacity. So DOT will not do any road improvements until that road is at or beyond capacity. We don't have any in our budget as far as building new roads. Part of that is by design because we don't build a lot of new roads. The other thing is when you put those projects in the budget, they don't get funded or get done in a quick process. We quit putting those projects in the budget, even sidewalks. You'll see there's no sidewalk projects in the budget because we did it years ago and we just kept carrying the same project through multiple budgets. And it is for the folks in finance and for our auditors, it's just a nightmare. So now it's what we do. If we get approved for a road project or a sidewalk project, we'll come back to the board and say, hey, we've been approved for this. Our 10%, 20%, whatever our match is X amount of dollars. If the board wants to do it, then we need to put that in the budget through a budget amendment. And that's how we've handled those projects. But we don't have any big road projects. The town doesn't on the horizon anytime soon. Most of what we will be doing will be sidewalk projects and resurfacing.
Okay, thank you. My point in that question was that I think it's important for all of us to understand that there really are two systems, if you will, pavements that need to be maintained and or widened or expanded. And it's not just as simple as a matter of our throwing more money at it or adding a line item to make those projects happen. Related question though, back in February, we received the pavement condition report that the consultant hired by the town does periodically. And in that report, those of us who looked at it carefully, we found that there are certain certain roads, streets, and pavement that is graded A, B, C, or D, or worse, by that consultant to give us an idea of the ongoing condition of our city streets, but also to give us an idea of the resources that we're going to have to apply and throw at those projects. Can you give us some idea just in general, in this budget, is the level of funding for maintenance or repair of the streets that we do own is the level of funding that we're including within the budget one that would be maintaining the straight line, improving our grading overall, or are we losing ground in this budget?
It wouldn't be improving. I think it would be maintaining. If anything, in some areas it might be losing a little. I think the report by the consultant recommended $2 million a year in resurfacing for X number of years. And as you can see, we have $1.5 million in there. You know, it depends when we go out and look at the streets, which ones we do in which order, as to whether or not you'll be losing any. I don't see you losing a lot. And I think the key is you just have to maintain some type of funding for resurfacing. We've been kind of consistent, but not real consistent in that we may fund it 2 or 3 years and then not fund it at all for 2 or 3 years and then do it again for 2 or 3 years. I will tell you that our roads are in pretty good shape compared to a lot of folks around us. Some roads obviously are better than others, but we feel as though the $1.5 million is, you know, it's not the 2 million, but it's not 500,000 either. So it's not going to, you know, it's not going to take us from a F up to an A on every street, but it's not going to put us from a C to an F on every street either.
That's
so,
you know,
I think the key is consistency. And honestly, Alderman Apple, is what's happened is, you know, over the years, something else came up that we needed to put in the budget. And at the time we felt the streets were in good shape. And so we didn't include that resurfacing and we put whatever else it was in the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just a point of clarification that since it's come up several times, the pavement condition rating report was presented at the December 14th meeting of the Board of Aldermen. Steve Lander with Withers Ravenel, the consultant that the town had hired to do the pavement condition report, and our Director of Public Services, Doran Maltba, presented. But exactly the conclusions that you mentioned, that the town had been putting $500,000 a year into the street repaving, and that closer to $2 million a year would be needed to get the conditions up to a better rating.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments about the budget?
Madam Mayor, I would like to make one more point on Mayor Pro Tem Apple's question and concern. Is you've seen in different areas of town, mainly in neighborhoods, some of it on main roads that the town owns. Public Service has done a really good job of going in and doing some crack sealing. You know, it doesn't look the greatest. It looks like a bunch of dark black squiggly lines on the pavement, and you got some gray pavement, some bright dark black lines. But it's what that does is on the roads that just have some cracks in them, we can go in and do that crack sealing a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient than resurfacing the entire road. And it buys you some time on that road. And I think that Dorn and his crew have been very diligent about doing that. And that has, that's saved some of our roads from deteriorating down from that level C down to an F or whatever, which has bought us a little more time on those roads as well.
That makes a good point, and that is that I really do think we need to thank our Public Works Department, who Doran and his staff for managing all that. He's got a daunting task in front of him to keep those miles in good shape. They do a great job, and I think folks need to know that it's not a matter that if you drive over a street and you experience bumps, it's not because Public Works is not doing their job. It sort of comes home to roost right up here. You know, we can allocate as much money as we want to it, but we're trying to do the prudent thing and have a balanced maintenance program. But they do a great job with the resources that they have to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Chris, do you have any comments about the budget this year?
No.
Okay. JR, do you have any comments about the budget this year?
Negative.
Joe?
No, I just wanted to congratulate everybody that worked on it. I'm sorry, I forgot to hit my button. I wanted to thank everyone that was involved in working on the budget, Franz and Curtis and staff. They put in a lot of long hours and I think did an admirable job as they always do. So thank you for all your hard work, Curtis.
I'm excited to see $1.5 million of paving in the budget. That should get some roads paved.
Yeah, and along with that, the board knows, but I'll say it again so the citizens know, we will be doing some additional resurfacing in addition to that on town roads that City County Utilities has went in and they've done the pipe bursting and putting in new pipes. I'm sure you all have seen them. It's the one where you've got Road Plate City riding down the road and then they take away the road plates and pave it. And I don't know which one's worse, the paving job or the road plate. But they both amount to a pretty good bump when you go across it. But we will be going in and resurfacing those roads as well, using some of the funds that we have over at City County Utilities. So we'll get some more roads than what you would think we could do, but some of that will come from a different funding source as well. We've already done a few of those. I think Baxter Street has been done, maybe Fall Street and some other roads over in that area, Vernon Street. So some of those roads have already been done that we had in mind to do. So you'll start seeing some of that, even more of that take place when the contractor gets back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Swisher. So as we reviewed, the budget's been worked on since January, and we've been informed of the processes as it's gone along. We had the full budget workshop last week and the public hearing tonight. Does the board feel like you'd like to vote on the budget tonight or schedule it for a meeting later this month?
I'd make a motion to vote on the budget tonight. I just want to make sure I understand how we're going to vote on this. If the particular alderman that is on a board does not recuse themselves from the vote altogether, then we're going to make a motion, or someone's going to make a motion such as me to approve it as written, excluding the governing body portion for $952,305. Is that correct?
Okay, and who is currently on a board that's affected? Because some folks have resigned.
Alderman Penix, to my knowledge, is still on a board that is recommended to receive funding in the budget. So I think.
Which board, Joe? Because I thought you had resigned from one of the boards recently.
It's not a board of directors, and that's
Okay.
why I was unsure about it. It's an advisory board for the Salvation Army.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And so my recommendation would be to keep Alderman Penix from being charged with a Class 1 misdemeanor, probably for him to
So-
recuse himself.
I wanted to clarify which board it was because he's served in the past on many boards.
Yes,
So it's the Salvation Army, not
correct.
Kernersville or Cedar Gardens.
And to my knowledge, he is the only alderman that is on one of the boards that is recommended. If there's another alderman sitting on one of those nonprofit boards being recommended for funding, we might have to take a different approach, which would mean I would probably have to tell you to do it in 2 weeks so I can figure out what that approach would be. But I don't think there's any other alderman on another nonprofit board being funded.
Is it going to be easier for him to recuse himself from the vote than it is to go through taking the governing body out and going that route?
I think that's up to Alderman Penix, but that's certainly the easiest way is for him to state his feelings on the budget if he would like, or say any more than what he said, and then just recuse himself from the entire vote on the budget. But I think that's up to Alderman Penix. If he wants to vote on the budget with the exception of that, then I think you do it the other way that you just mentioned earlier.
And how many votes does the budget need to pass? Doesn't it need 4 out of 5 votes? 3 out of 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, that's correct. The budget is the one ordinance that can be passed with a simple majority on the day of introduction or any time.
Okay, Curtis, I would like to recuse myself from voting on the budget in its entirety. simply because I'm just on an advisory board, but I think that's the cleanest way to do it. And I would like to express my approval of the budget. I think it's well written. I think it meets our needs, and but I'll recuse myself from the vote.
Do we need to vote on accepting his recusal? That's a request as I take it.
Yes, ma'am, I
Okay,
would.
do I have a motion to recuse Alderman Penix from voting on the budget for the basis?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Alderman Thompson, second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, Mr. Penix is recused from the vote on the budget. All right, do I have a motion on the budget?
Motion to approve as written.
Motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 2022-2023 budget by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. I have Alderman Thompson in favor, Alderman Apple in favor, and Alderman Gorham in favor. All those opposed? I have Alderman Barrow opposed. The motion passes 3-1. So the budget is then approved, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, congratulations, Curtis, and for all the town employees. You're going to get paid in July.
That's it. And thank you to the board. I appreciate your support through the process. It's always makes it easier on my end. When I meet with all the board members, I think I met with all of you and went over the budget and tried to get in, things that were common to everybody. So I appreciate your support. Definitely want to throw out a congratulations or a thanks rather to the department heads for all of their hard work. They do all of the heavy lifting on it. They get it to me, and over the years, they've done a great job of cutting out what we don't need in there when we start, so it makes the process a lot easier. And as you all have seen in the budget, there's not a lot of fluff in it, and it's that way when it gets to me. So that does definitely make it easier, makes my job easier, makes your job easier. And again, I appreciate the support you all give us every year. And I think knowing that support is there makes the department head's job easier when they go forward, putting things in their budget as well. So thank you. It's the earliest we've gotten the budget adopted in a while. So that's good. We'll move on now and not have to worry about it on June the 29th. So that's good.
Get some of that equipment ordered in the vehicles maybe before the prices go up.
Ironically, we're still trying to get some equipment in from the fiscal year 2021 budget. So it's taking a little while to get some stuff in. So the earlier we order it, the better we are. So we'll get set up to start ordering it July 1. So maybe it'll come in.
Well, in all seriousness, to the town employees, you do a great job for us. We appreciate the efforts to keep our town running smoothly, the emergency services and the public services that are essential to the operation and of our town and the convenience of our citizens. We really appreciate all your efforts to protect the life, health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the town of Kernersville. And to all of the residents of Kernersville, this budget does retain the current tax rate. So that's good news as well. So appreciate the board and everybody's hard work on this, and definitely the efforts also of our finance director and our finance department and Curtis and of course our town clerk Keith. So we really appreciate all that y'all have done to bring us this budget. And Mr. Barrow, is there any other objections to the budget beside the one you had previously voiced?
No, that's the only objection I have to it. The rest of it is good with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrow. All right, with that, I think we should probably have a brief recess. So let us stand in a brief recess. right, we'll call this meeting back to order. We'll begin with item 2, which is our public session. We'll begin with item 2A, speakers from the floor. If there's anyone who'd like to speak to the board about an item that is not otherwise on the agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 2B. It's a continued discussion from May 4th relating to the rezoning case of David Michaels, agent for Windsor Investments LLC, Bruce Atkins, Rita Atkins, Adam Atkins, and Seth Atkins, owners, requesting a rezoning, zoning docket K798, and item B1, consideration of an ordinance rezoning said property. As we left it, there were many concerns raised by the neighbors in the area, comments by the developer, and everyone was going to take some time and work more on this. So I believe they've been in communication with our community development department. So I'll start with Ms. Catherine Garner.
Thank you, Mayor. Following the May 4th Alderman meeting, the applicant has worked with the neighbors and has submitted a revised plan with some changes. Full-size copies were laid at your desk, and I do have some extras if there's anybody in the audience who wants to look at one just to follow along. So a discharge point for the stormwater control measure behind lot 176 will be relocated away from Mr. Main's property. That area is shown in the red circle. So the developer is to acquire off-site drainage easements as necessary, and the applicant told me that he has received a verbal agreement from Mr. Main to direct the pipe across his property. The applicant is also proposing to provide a 6-foot minimum height earth berm as viewed from east to west at the rear of lots 151 to 170. The berm shall be planted to a type 1 standard with within a 20-foot buffer yard. So the type 1 buffer yard plantings are just 2 deciduous trees and 8 evergreen shrubs per 100 linear feet. He is proposing to use green giant arborvitae, Nellie Stevens holly, and cryptomeria. All the planting materials would be verified at time of construction document submittal. He's also proposing to utilize curb and gutter on Watkins Ford Road improvements subject to NCDOT approval, and that is shown along Lot 1 here along Watkins Ford Road. The applicant is also proposing a street stub to the adjacent parcel to the north, PIN number 6884023348, with the UDO required 5-foot reserve strip. Staff agrees with the stub out to the adjacent parcel, but has concerns about the stub as it's shown connecting to the cul-de-sac. So staff is recommending to the Alderman a condition requiring the street stub with the location to be determined during the construction document phase. So we can find the best location for that keeps the connection, but provides for adequate connectivity and safety. The rezoning recommendation from Planning Board and staff was to amend the UDO to adopt the proposed RS7C, finding that the rezoning allows for the site-specific plan to be considered, and the petitioner's submitted design incorporates the watershed protection, and the proposed development will help meet the demand for additional single-family housing with a variety of lot sizes. So on the site plan, staff is also recommending approval subject to the conditions as presented in the staff report, with the 2 additional conditions recommended by Planning Board. These were discussed at the May 4th meeting, that the gate shall be added at the emergency access point and the building height shall not exceed 30 feet. And then also subject to additional conditions as presented to you tonight, with the street stub meeting the UDO standards shall be designed to the property to the north, with the final stub out location being determined during construction document submittal. The additional stormwater control measure discharge point to be constructed behind lot 176 to discharge off-site, with those drainage easements being acquired by the developer as necessary. The 6-foot minimum height earth berm shall be constructed within the common area behind lots 151 to 170, shall be located within a minimum of a 20-foot buffer yard and planted to meet the type 1 buffer yard standards, which will be verified at the time of construction document submittal, and that curb and gutter shall be installed along lot 1 on Watkins Ford Road as approved by NCDOT.
Thank you. All right, this is a public session item. We have a maximum of 15 minutes for public comments. I have David Michaels signed up to speak and Shannon Grubbs signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during the public comment time? If there's anyone else other than David Michaels and Shannon Grubbs who'd like to speak, if you could raise your hand. Okay, and to the point that Ms. Garner made that she has printed copies of some of this information, is there anyone who'd like, and she already presented what the content of it, but is there anyone there in the audience who would like a copy of the printed materials? If you would, please signify by raising your hand. I saw two other people. I think you might need yours for the moment, Mr. Barrow. You might need yours for the moment. We can always print some more. Okay, is there anyone else? Because Mr. Barrow and Bill are going to share if there is. Okay. All right, so at this time, I'll recognize David Michaels. If you could take no more than 7 minutes.
David Michaels, 5603 New Garden Village Drive in Greensboro, 27410. I do appreciate the time tonight to come back before this board and the time that we spent with the community in reviewing our proposal over the last month or so, and also the expediency with which the board has agreed to reconvene this discussion. Just very briefly, since the last meeting we did, I reached out to the neighbors, Mr. Reggie Austin in particular, who made the presentation, representative, I believe, the majority of the group at the Alderman meeting on May the 4th. And we had some good conversations over the past month, some very productive, professional, courteous conversations, which were intended to hopefully understand what we were presenting from our side, educate a little bit about stormwater ponds and their effect on their operation, and how they sort of go hand in hand with this proposal that we had put forth, and also to understand specifically some of their concerns that were presented at the meeting. And so through a process of personal meetings that we had with Mr. Austin, Mr. Mike Hooser, Mr. Cleve Main, R.C. Davis, mostly folks there along Carvey Smith Road, but Mr. Austin had represented that he had spoken with a large group of people, somewhere 20 to 25, that they had worked together to respond to the discussions that he and I in particular were having, so that we could then continue that dialogue in a smaller group. And that's basically the proposal that's come back before you today, the changes that we've recommended to the site plan. So I'm happy to answer really any questions that the board may have about those changes. There's a couple of other items that really can't be put forth in terms of a zoning condition that we have agreed in good faith to continue to work with the neighbors on, such as working with the DOT to try to adjust the speed limits or possibly some concerns about rental occupancy in the neighborhood. So we continue to look forward to having those conversations with Mr. Austin or anyone who's interested in continuing to see this process through. But other than that, I do hope that we addressed a number of the concerns that were raised at the last meeting, and I would certainly ask for your support in our proposal at this time.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Grubbs.
Hello, my name is Shannon Grubbs. I live at 159 Carby Smith Road. I'm actually the daughter of Reggie and Robin Austin that Mr. Michaels has been coordinating with and talking with. And I just want to start by saying that my comments tonight, I want to preface them by saying that I appreciate Windsor and the time that they've spent with the neighbors and working with my dad and trying to make these changes so to make the least impact possible to us neighbors. This is my last-ditch effort, I guess, to ask the aldermen to reconsider the type of development that's going into this space. And not to backtrack on any deals that we've had, but I think that it was a little unclear from our last meeting on when to address these concerns because of the way that the meeting was laid out with the proposed site plan and the zoning and the land use. So it was like, we were told we could only talk about the site plan, at that time versus the zoning. So I didn't really know when to make these comments before, and I apologize that they've not been said, and they have been said, but I would really like the town to consider developing this area with a lower density development. And I know we keep saying vaguely lower density, but I'm talking estate type homes on a 3-acre lot, one home on a 3-acre lot or a 4-acre lot. And I don't know all the numbers and what that means zoning wise, but I know right now the development that is being proposed, we're looking at, 2.6, but it's more than that because of the areas that have been set aside for water retention. I understand that those are needed, but it's still a lot of homes. And I just ask you to consider using this space to create a smoother gradients between the rural farm areas, residents such as our own in this area, and this massive influx of development that you're seeing on the southeast corner of Forsyth County and in Kernersville, such as Weldon Village and Caleb's Creek that are just to our north. And I just want to, I know there's been comments made by the town in the past that there's, a demand that you guys need to fill for the community. But I argue that there is a demand for all types of homes. And as we mentioned in our last meeting, there are people that want to come to Kernersville that want acreage, that want land, that don't want to be in a neighborhood, that want space. And they don't want a neighbor right on top of them. And we can prove that because our neighbor on Carby Smith Road has recently sold 4 lots, over 4 and 5 acre lots that they were fielding multiple offers at asking over because people are desperate to come and have that rural lifestyle. And I just ask you guys that to recognize that this is one of the few areas left in Kernersville that can offer this for people wanting to, new residents or existing residents that want to stay in Kernersville. And the thing is, once it's built, there's no going back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I just hope that you guys will consider protecting that rural lifestyle that you guys once promoted, especially in this area. However, and I'll end this by saying, again, this is nothing against Windsor Home and their site development plan, and I appreciate their efforts to work with us. And if the town is so inclined that they want to see this type of development in this area and this need, I think that their site plan, is a good fit. If that's the density that you're looking for. But again, I just ask you to consider trying to find a developer that is looking for a different type of home and space, so that small town charm that Kernersville still offers, that people from the outside coming in still recognize. So, thank you.
Thank you. there are a few minutes left. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Okay, I don't see anybody else who is offering to speak. So is there any discussion by the board?
Yes, I got a question.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Barrow. If you could
It
be
seems
sure to
like-
have your microphone.
It seems like the last time we were here, we were talking about that the density was too high. And what I see they brought back is the same density with a berm. Basically is what I see as a difference. And Ms. Grubbs, I'm with you. I think the density's too high. Transitioning from, I think, Weldon Village up to here, I think the density has to be lower. Putting all these houses, 216 lots right next to Carvey, Smith Road down there, that's not going to fit well at all. And what I think about is when I was a kid, there'd be lots of kids over there. And I remember a neighbor had a bull. And of course, you know, you couldn't help but try to get in there with that bull, you know, and all the mischief and bad things that happened. And that was here in Kernersville 60 years ago. And I can only imagine the problems that the country people are going to have with all the city people on these lots. And for that reason, you know, I cannot support it at this time. It's a transition area, and I think it should be a lower density. That's my thought.
Okay, any other comments or thoughts or questions?
Madam Mayor, I have a question, I guess of Mr. Michaels, if I may. There certainly is some appeal to 1 to 3 acre or more lots, just philosophically as expressed by Ms. Grubbs. In terms of cost, if the number of houses that Windsor includes in their business plan were reduced to provide lot sizes of that acreage, what is your estimate of what the selling price for those homes would be? I guess my question more directly is, would it be affordable for a sufficient percentage of the population to make it economically feasible to be built?
It certainly would increase the price significantly to go from the lot sizes we're proposing, which is 50 to 60
Mr.
foot
Michaels,
lot.
if you could maybe move the microphone so it picks up your voice a little better. You can put it on top of the podium if that helps. Thank you.
Is that better?
I think so.
Okay. You know, you look at how much street you have to put in, how much infrastructure you have to put in with a site to determine how much the lot's going to cost in addition to the cost of the land. And so when you spread those lots out over the same number of length of street, it certainly is going to significantly increase the cost of that lot, which in turn is going to drive up the price of that house. Even at where we're at with these particular size lots, I think we made some reference during the last hearing that we expected the price point to be somewhere in the $350 to $400 plus range on a fairly efficient street layout. The site is clustered somewhat to consolidate the development on the better parts of the land and to leave those peripheral areas more or less untouched, and especially along Carvey Smith Road, where there is already existing development in place, and it's intended to help soften the impact of this development against those particular neighbors, and that's the intent of the berm that we have discussed and offered and agreed to put the berm in to help create a visual and an acoustic screen with some planning in there as well. So it's definitely going to increase the cost of that house, and I'm not saying there's not, you know, a buyer for something in a $500,000 range, and the cost of everything is going up. but I guess it's how many, and do they have other options to choose from in this general area that could adequately meet the demand for someone looking for that? Most people, they want a nice house, they want an adequate yard, place for some kids, or a little bit to maintain. But the majority of people buying houses, new houses, are looking for a little less maintenance that a 3-acre lot would provide, as well as the cost. So it would be a significant increase, and whether if somebody's willing to fill that demand, it's going to take a whole lot more land to accommodate it. And from, I would think, the city's perspective, you need some efficiency in terms of density to be able to service a neighborhood with police, fire, garbage, public safety, all those things, street maintenance, et cetera, that goes into a community and providing for the citizens that live there.
Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, I need
Yes,
to,
Mr.
I need to
Swisher.
ask Mr. Michaels a question for clarification, because it was something that came up last time. At the last hearing, you were working with one of the property owners to obtain the easement for the sewer line. Have you been able to obtain that easement yet?
We're still working on that. We do not have that easement in place yet, and that will have to be done under the condition that's set forth in this zoning to be able to move forward with that easement.
Okay, so with that in mind, as the board was told last time, there's a condition in the rezoning that if Mr. Michaels cannot obtain that easement, that the board will implement condemnation for that easement for the sewer line. That's, I think, condition number 2, maybe, under the conditional use district. States that during the sewer line permitting process, condemnation is required for additional right-of-way and/or easements. Developers shall provide documentation that good faith effort to purchase property at market value is made. The developer shall procure surveying services, provide all mapping documentation, pay all costs associated with the condemnation, including but not limited to legal fees, appraisal, survey review, and property costs. So that's what that means. The developer will pay for it, but the town will be the one to institute the condemnation proceedings if he's not able to reach an agreement to acquire that easement. As you all have, I think we told the board at the last time, Mr. Michaels, I think even showed it on the map, it's basically across the front of an individual's property. It will not impact their property. What they can or can't do with it is across the front of it. But I know he said last time he was working with the individual. I just wanted to clarify whether or not he had reached an agreement to purchase that. And if not, let the board know that that is a condition that at some point in time, the board may have to proceed with condemnation. And usually it doesn't go that far. Once the board says we'll condemn it, they usually move along pretty quickly at reaching an agreement.
I got a question on that.
Hang on just a minute. Are there any more questions of Mr. Michaels at this time? Okay, Mr. Michaels, you may have a seat. Go ahead, Mr.
I've
Vera.
got a question about the condemnation. You're telling me that the town can condemn this property that we don't own, right? And that we're condemning it for someone else's private use?
You can condemn it for public use such as a sewer, yes, sir. Just as you could for a road or water line, sewer line, utilities, you can condemn property for that. Yeah. Which we have done in the past in these situations, where developers went in and they've started a project and somebody, for whatever reason, wouldn't sell. Sometimes it might be that the property is owned by an estate and there's 15 heirs, or you might get someone that's in a nursing home that can't be reached or whatever, and it has been condemned.
And they would be responsible for all costs, even if they fought it?
Yes, sir.
All costs associated and all of that?
Yes, sir. And that is written in the condition. They're responsible for all costs associated with the condemnation, including but not limited to legal fees, appraisal, survey review, property costs. An individual just cannot an individual entity can't go in and proceed with condemnation. It has to be a governing body of some type.
If one of the parties chose to take the matter of condemnation and whether we did it or not, the way we did it and so forth, to the North Carolina Court of Appeals or higher, would those legal fees also have to be borne by the developer?
All of it.
All legal fees.
And the way the condemnation works is Mr. Michaels will go through and get a survey of the property that he's needing to take, and he would get an appraisal on that property. And usually, I mean, the value is going to be pretty low and minimal because this property, again, it's not making their whole parcel, rendering it useless. Again, it's a small portion along the front. And so they get an appraisal on it. We put the money up as a town, it's Mr. Michael's money, but we present that money to the court through the taking, and then he can start work. So it's not like the individual can hold up the process. The sewer line will go in, and then if they dispute the value of the property that was taken, then it works its way through the court process. But the project will move forward, just like it would with a road or something of that nature.
The deposit of the funds is determined by the appraisal. Once they're made into the court, then the ownership transfers, the taking occurs at that moment.
Well, I have a question. If there is an appeal, then this is probably a silly question, but it comes to mind. If there happens to be an appeal having to do with the condemnation, it goes to the North Carolina Court of Appeals and they say, no, you can't condemn it for this purpose. What happens to the subdivision?
They only argue the value of the value.
It's only the value.
Okay.
It's not whether or not you can do the condemnation and put the line in. The only thing they're arguing is the value.
The law is clear that this is a permissible legal remedy.
Okay, I think that's important for us to know, so thank you. Thank you.
Where's this at exactly on this map?
I don't know, Mr. Michaels, I have to show you.
Catherine, can you put the map back up, please?
I don't have my map in front of me, Alderman Bear.
I can describe it. I don't know if it's fully shown. Yes, I believe it is. So from our intersecting point on Watkins Ford Road, the sewer line would be proposed to run along the north side of Watkins Ford Road to the west. It would continue across basically 4 property owners until you get back to the intersection at Kippet Drive, and there is a public accessible sewer manhole with the correct elevation that would receive all of this flow from the site into that manhole. So it would basically be within the first 30 feet or so outside of the right-of-way. There's also a water line that runs along that north side of the road. And from a topography standpoint, it's easier to put the sewer line on this side of the road than the other side because there's a much more of an elevation change there. So we deem this to be the best location for the sewer line. And so everything along that frontage would basically be in a setback area for the property owner. It's not like they could put a house or some improvement in that area otherwise. It's anything that's not already there. If they want to add something, it can't be in that area. It's along the frontage of the property. It's not like it's going through the middle of the property or something.
I've got a quick question, sorry. Mr. Michaels. Can you hear me?
Mr. Michaels, you can come
Quick
forward
question
again.
for you.
I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
Is there a reason that the berm stopped short of the main property?
Basically because the retention pond that's shown right there, we would presume that would be some sort of a earth embankment dam that typically not a good practice to plant trees along a dam. It would be elevated above the property. I will note that there was a comment about Mr. Main helping us with the easement, and we appreciate that. Mr. Atkins, I met with him yesterday and walked the property. He is also willing, and most likely we would just contain that stormwater discharge over on the property that he owns and not affect Mr. Main at all. But we do appreciate his cooperation and discussing and hopefully working something out there that's good for everybody.
And how about the berm from lot 95 to lot 86? Excuse me. Is there a reason?
Is that along the northern portion?
Yes.
Right there? Right. I actually spoke with that property owner. They asked the same question, and if you were to look on Google an aerial photo, you can see that that property is heavily wooded already. They basically already have a visual screen in place that they control, that they protect. Everything else along Carvey Smith, where we're showing it, is very open. So a visual screen would be helpful there, but it wouldn't provide any benefit in that particular location. If it's a matter of just creating a berm with excess topsoil or something, we would certainly work with that property owner to do that. But didn't feel like any plantings were needed in that area because they control their own buffer at this point.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment, Mayor Morgan.
Speaking to your microphone.
Sure, sorry.
Thank you.
I know that both parties were tasked with trying to get together and trying to figure out a mutual agreement. We've heard from the developer, and I appreciate everyone getting together and amicably at least having a discussion. But based on what I'm seeing and based on the email that I got last Thursday from Reggie Austin, who claims he met with most folks last night, the summary of the requirements that it appears that Mr. Austin, being the representative of everyone, the summary of his requirements appears that they've been addressed on this new plan. And that being said, it appears to me that most of both parties on each side are in agreement with this plan. So, I mean, I support the plan the way it is with these additional items that have been added per Mr. Austin's email and per the developer's comments tonight. That's just my opinion. Just want to state it.
Mayor, I have one additional question. Mr. Michaels alluded to some conversation about a limit as to the percentage of units that could be made available for rental. Okay. I think it's important that we all know the extent to which that can be controlled at this point, the extent to which it may not be controlled, and the extent to which that might be controlled within HOA formation documents, homeowners association documents. Curtis, could I ask you first to address that, and then Mr. Michaels, would you add your comments?
I know there is one neighborhood development subdivision, whatever you want to call it, in Kernersville that addressed that particular issue. And I think they did it, Mr. Apple, when they were doing the development. And I think it was in the conditions of the rezoning that they place in the HOA covenants or declarations, restrictions, whichever one would be appropriate. And I'm not familiar enough to know which one of those would be the most appropriate. But they, at the time, it was a requirement of the rezoning that they placed that in the HOA covenants that no more than, I think at the time for that particular one, maybe 15% of the units could be investor owned or used as rental. It would not be up to Mr. Michaels to enforce. It would initially, but at some point in time, when the ownership of the HOA is turned over to the owners out there that live out there that own property, at that point in time, it is up to the HOA to enforce that. Now, if they, HOA chooses not to enforce that, what happens, I don't know if someone outside the development would be able to bring action against them. I'm not familiar. I don't know that. I do know that the particular neighborhood that I'm thinking of has enforced theirs and still does enforce theirs. And they do it, when someone comes in, there's always probably ways around it. For instance, if you pay cash and the closing is simply cash closing, you may not pick up on it or something like that. If you bought a unit and you moved out and you wanted to let your cousin stay in it and you say, hey, they're just in there. I don't know what counts as that. But you can, I'm pretty sure, put that as a condition of the rezoning that the HOA established something like that. Now, again, that was several years ago when that took place. Mr. Michaels has done by far more developments in that period of time, and he knows how the HOA works on that and what the requirements are. So he might have some different information that tells you that you can't do that really right now. It has to go through the process of the HOA, but it can be done. I just don't know at what point it's done. I don't know if it's done with you all by putting it as a condition in the rezoning, or if that's changed with the change in laws and it has to be done on Mr. Michael's end. I don't know.
Well, I think we've had some conversations from time to time as individual board members as to the nature or the, if you will, the quality of folks who will occupy residences and subdivisions with higher density. And I've heard more than one expression that it really does, kind of change the degree to which the roots of those families who locate their place in the community, tenants versus owners. And I think that's really important. And Mr. Michaels may have, this has moved pretty quickly, but I know Mr. Michaels is in the process of consulting maybe with your attorney about what can and cannot be done. If I'm a resident out there, that's pretty important to me. And frankly, from a standpoint of the town, I think it's important that we try to promote, if we can't provide, or if we elect not to for business reasons or otherwise, not to provide the 1 to 3 or 4 acre lots, what can we do to encourage or to promote the establishment of residential roots within that community as best we can? Do you have any updated information, Mr. Michael?
I don't have a clear answer on the legalities of it. We, our attorney that we typically work these issues through with Fox Rothschild, I think we've had a brief conversation with him. Mr. Hall was in the audience. He had a conversation with him, but he had to do some more research in terms of where similar language like that had been introduced, and he has not had an opportunity to get back to us as yet. And that's I had stated to Mr. Austin, I think that we're going to continue to work there. I don't really have a clear answer right now. We typically would have conditions in the covenants about leases have to be in writing. They have to be for a minimum period of a year. They have to be provided to the board so they are aware of those situations as they're occurring within a neighborhood. And so it's clearly something that, even if it was a condition, I'm not sure that the town, I don't know the legalities of somebody else coming trying to enforce that condition on the HOA. It's really up to the HOA, I think, to police that, and they can choose to police it or not. I'm sure if it got out of hand, then somebody would step in and want to do that. But it's sort of like, every board's going to be a little bit different and how active are the residents. But certainly there's HOAs are with us, and they're going to continue to be with us and ever growing. So I understand the concern in the marketplace currently that there are a number of investors out there buying houses. Our intent is for this to be primarily a for sale to the owner occupant type neighborhood. We do allow some investor purchases, but try to keep that to a reasonable minimum. I don't know if Mr. Hall would like to comment any further on that. I'll certainly give him that opportunity, but that's the current understanding that I have of it.
I'm not worried so much about
Do-
the enforcement
Do
mechanism.
you want to hear from Mr. Hall?
Sure, I'm sorry. Sure.
Then
yes.
ask Mr. Hall a question.
Yes.
Mr. Hall, if you could state your name and business address for the record.
I'm going to put it down here, I think. Tom Hall with Windsor Homes, 5603 New Garden Village Drive in Greensboro. I think first I would say that I appreciate the discussion on this issue. I think you got to tread lightly on it. We are consulting with attorneys. I think that you have to tread lightly as well on just discussion related to if a renter tenant is worse than a homeowner as a quality of a person living in a home. I think those are things that as we've gone through different municipalities, some municipalities would really balk at that, and they want everybody and to be inclusive. So I think it's a very touchy situation. As it gets to the HOA, we are selling houses to people that want to live in them, because right now it's so difficult for people to buy a house. We don't want to have them shut out by somebody who wants to buy it to rent it. So we are very particular about that. And have we put that in our documents? No, we haven't. But that's definitely the approach we want to take. The next thing, I know the subdivision that is being talked about, and I know the challenge is that's a subdivision that's going to have about 2,000 houses. They could probably afford some enforcement more than a typical place could, but it is very awkward, cumbersome, and time consuming for them to manage. And I think, as David tried to point out, who ultimately is going to do that? I don't know, but certainly I appreciate the discussion about this issue, but I do think it is touchy, for one. Secondly, our intent is to sell houses to people that want to own and be owner occupants of that. We'll hear more from our attorney, who is getting us some more information related to what could be done and how that would work. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm a little sensitive to the situation, because as realtors and so on, we have to be inclusive.
Let me be sure that there's a clear understanding that I perhaps was not as articulate as I might have been, but I don't mean in any way to not be inclusive or to categorize a renter versus an owner in any fashion, other than the fact that I think that there is home ownership is an integral part of our history and of our society. Home ownership is colorless. Home ownership is not, as long as it's economically feasible for party A to do it, it's economically feasible for party B. So I don't mean in any way to categorize renters versus owners. I've been both, so I know what that feels like. But it's a concern that I've heard discussed. We talked about it a little bit in our meeting the other day with David, and we understand there's not really a conclusive answer to it, but thank you.
And we're sensitive to it, and I appreciate that. And understand. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
comment.
Mr. Barra,
I
or
do.
comments?
You fellows are in this to make money, correct?
If you have a question, someone, you need to identify the person and ask them to come to the podium, please.
Okay, Mr. Michael. Y'all are in this business to make a profit, correct?
Windsor does operate with the intention of making a profit, yes, sir.
Right. I mean, that's what allows you to do the thing you do. My concern is, after hearing this, is that are we getting ready to vote on something here that might wind up being a rental community as opposed to a residential homeowner community? Is that what we're doing here? And that's a rhetorical question. By allowing such small lot sizes in something like this, I mean, is that where we're going? And because with the frenzy of home buying right now, you know, cash offers, no inspection, nothing, $350,000 is well within the investor model. And I just wonder if y'all have done any research on that.
We know there are people out there who are doing whole communities like that. That's not our intent with this. I think if it were, we would describe that up front so that you would be clear in terms of what the purpose of this neighborhood would be. But that's not our intent. As Mr. Hall stated, we want to sell to owner occupants. We know there are a few investors out there, and just depending on how the market may fluctuate up or down, sometimes those investors are helpful to move a house or two. But the intent is this to be primarily owner occupied. And the purpose of the HOA, among other things, is to protect those property values for everyone who lives in that community, to make sure that those homes are maintained properly, no matter who's living there. Even if it's rented to someone else, the owner has the obligation of following all of those HOA covenants. And the board, hopefully, you know, once we turn it over to them in good shape, that they will continue to enforce those rules and regulations to make sure that all of those homes are properly maintained and well represented in the community.
This question is for Curtis. You're saying that there's nothing we can do to ensure that a certain percentage of the houses are rental and another percentage is owner occupied? Is there nothing we can do about that?
I don't think so. I think it's up to the developer to offer that condition.
Right.
And I think the way it came up in the previous case, it was brought up and the condition was put in there that there would be no on-site leasing or rental office.
Right.
And so at that point, the developer offered the condition of, you know, we're putting in our restrictive covenants no more than 10%, 15%, whatever it might be. And, you know, the other concern there is I guess the legality of the restrictive covenants at that point versus the restrictions of the zoning. You know, if a future HOA 20, 30 years down the road goes in and they get a majority of the folks in HOA to agree to change the covenants, you know, can they do that if it's a condition of the rezoning and all of that? So I think it's something that has to go through their HOA. And I say that, and I'm sorry, I forgot the other gentleman, Mr. Hall. I think Mr. Hall had, you know, kind of hit on it. The other case that was done was back in 2006, and that was obviously prior to the change in the general statute. And I think when that changed, that took away some of the authority of elected bodies to do that. Now, with that being said, I know that it's being considered again, but it's not been done yet that I'm aware of. I think the HOAs can certainly go in and do it.
Who sets up the HOA?
Mr. Michaels will set that up.
Y'all set that up? Your attorneys will set it up, correct? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there further discussion, comments, questions? Mr. Penix, have you got any comments or questions? Mr. Gorham? Mr. Thompson's already spoken. Do you have anything else?
Well, would make a motion to approve the rezoning as well as the site plans and the conditions written by staff.
Okay, and if you could be a little more specific about what that would
Can we
include.
put this up on, I really did want to read all of this.
Are you talking about, if you could just maybe refer to the ones that have been added
Sure.
since the last meeting?
Yes, the site plan and conditions that have been added since the last meeting. I think there's 6 items.
1 through 6, okay. Mr. Hooker, have you got that motion?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is everyone familiar with what Mr. Thompson's referring to as items 1 through 6 as additional conditions? Mr. Powell, do you have anything to add?
He was looking for something else.
Okay. All right, I have a motion for approval of the site plan and conditions as presented by staff with the additional conditions 1 through 6. Do I have a second?
I'd second.
I have a second by Mr. Apple. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. I have Mr. Thompson, Mr. Apple, and Mr. Penix in favor. All those opposed? I have Mr. Barrow and Mr. Gorham opposed. Mr. Swisher, on a 3-2 vote, what happens next?
I think it changed, when the law changed on 3-2 vote on the zoning, it carries. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. There is no second reading required on a rezoning case.
Okay, the zoning has been approved. Appreciate everybody's involvement in this process. Item 2C is consideration of an ordinance for budget amendment number 8. Mr. Swisher.
Madam Mayor and Board, you have budget amendment number 8 for fiscal year 21-22 in your packet. These changes have been approved. Most of them have been approved already by the board. You'll see in number 6 under general fund expenditures, a decrease in the engineering department of $1.58 million to primarily reflect not completing the Kernersville Medical Parkway sewer project or Brookford Road sewer project. That project is still ongoing. We've not stopped it. We've just not completed it. It will not be done in this fiscal year. You'll also see in the general fund revenues, the offsetting revenue for that. We've decreased that to reflect the revenue that we will not be receiving. We have in there number 7 under general fund expenditures, the $200,000 to reflect the costs associated with acquisition of property at 319 Nelson Street. That is the property swap that the board approved, I think last month with Providence Baptist Church. Also have in there the money to cover the air conditioning over at the old Patterson Library building. $65,000. It is a little less than what we quoted the board last month. We quoted the board, I think at that time, 89. We received another quote the next morning actually, and it came down to 65,000 for that. And then number 9, increase in central maintenance department for expenditures associated with oil, lubricants, gasoline, diesel fuel, $117,000. That does not have an offsetting revenue. Overall, we did have an increase in revenues. You'll see under number 2, increase on unrestricted intergovernmental revenues for $1 million to reflect estimated sales and use tax revenues. So what that means is basically we think if everything goes as we forecasted through the rest of this fiscal year, we will receive $1 million more in sales and use tax than we projected at the beginning of the year. So overall, we will be decreasing the fund balance appropriated by an amount of $241,601 to bring our total appropriation to date to a little over $3 million. So be glad to answer any questions the board might have about any of the expenditures or revenues. There are a couple of special funds that went up or down, the biggest of those being workers' comp. We decreased the expenditures there. $350,000, that reflects a decrease in our anticipated workers' comp claims. So Be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? Do I have a motion?
Move we accept the budget amendment as proposed.
Motion for approval by Mayor Pro Tem Apple. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those in favor of the budget amendment, raise your right hand. Okay. I've got Mr. Penix, Mr. Gorham, Mr. Apple, and Mr. Thompson in favor. All opposed? Mr. Barrow. Okay, item D is consideration of an ordinance to proceed with demolition of building at 900A East Mountain Street.
Madam Mayor, this matter has been discussed with me by the attorney for the owner of the property, and they've asked for a meeting and discussion of resolution of this. And I would propose that we continue this until the June 22nd meeting, and we will meet with them between that time.
Okay, Mr. Swisher, we had talked about possibly being able to consolidate the June 22nd and the June 28th meetings. Does it look like we'll have both meetings?
At this point, I'm not sure. It just depends on what we have come in. If we do, if we consolidate those two meetings, we'll just move this to the June 28th meeting.
Would it work to continue it to either of those two meetings? Is that specific enough?
Excuse me, I could not hear you.
We can make the motion to continue it to the next meeting that's held. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, do I have a motion to continue this agenda item to the next meeting?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman Thompson, second by Alderman Barrow. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, we are to the consent agenda. If my paper agenda is lining up with the digital one. And it is. Okay, so we are to item 3, the consent agenda. Item 1 is approval of minutes for the April 19th closed session. B is approval of minutes for the April 27 closed session. C is consideration of ordinance for Forsyth County to collect town of Kernersville taxes for 2022. D is a consideration of an ordinance for Forsyth County to collect town of Kernersville taxes for prior years. Is there anyone who in the audience, staff or citizens who are in attendance, who would like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there any elected official on the board who'd like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda? Got a motion by Alderman Penix. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, we've got item 5, town manager's report.
I do not have anything.
Okay, we've got the town attorney's report.
Madam Mayor, we do have need for a short closed session.
Very good. Okay, Mr. Penix, do you have anything to present this evening? Thank you. Mr. Gorham? Yep. Mr. Apple?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Barrow? Mr. Thompson?
I have one question for Curtis. Have we gotten any complaints from Brewer's Kettle area about the noise ordinance?
Not that I'm aware of in the last month, probably. Right after you all approved the new noise ordinance, we were out there probably 3 or 4 times a week. And once, the officers went out, they had the meter to test the decibel levels, the decibel reader. And since that time, we went out and shown the individuals that, hey, they're not violating the decibel levels. We've not had any more calls since that time. And that was it went on for about 3 weeks? Probably about 3 weeks. And then after that, it's so far, Probably jinxed us, thank you. We've not had any more calls or complaints.
Okay, thank you.
I'll defer them to you if they call now since you've jinxed us.
I would like to just remind everybody about the upcoming 4th of July celebrations, including the Miss Mary's Children's Parade, which is the Saturday before, typically held at the end of June. This year, it's actually the first Saturday in July. So if you have children or grandchildren ages birth to 7 years old, it is particularly appropriate for them. Dress up in patriotic costume. Bring a wagon, a bicycle, parent, grandparent, definitely your cell phones to tape little videos of them walking or to take photographs. And Mr. Swisher's children, when they were younger, participated in it. And I've seen many other children over the years, including mine, be involved in it. So would encourage people to look into coming out to the Miss Mary's Children's Parade, sponsored by the Kiwanis Club. And then, of course, we have the 4th of July parade organized by the Rotary Club of Kernersville and the concert and fireworks organized by the Chamber and the Kernersville Parks and Rec Department. So just items to keep in mind and mark your calendar for that are upcoming.
Madam Mayor, could I interject there?
Absolutely.
And make the citizens of Kernersville aware that we will be celebrating our first Juneteenth celebration on Saturday, I think it's the 18th of this year. This will be our first time celebrating Juneteenth in Kernersville, and I would ask that our whole community come out and support that great event that's going to be taking place at Harmons Park from 10 to 2 on that Saturday. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing further, could I have a motion for a closed session?
Phone?
Go for it.
I didn't have my glasses tonight, but I'm going to make an attempt anyway. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3, I move that the board go into closed session to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged and pursuant to A5 regarding a contract concerning the purchase of real property.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It is unanimous. All right, we are Welcome back to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Is there any further business before the board this evening? If not, may I have a motion to adjourn? Got a motion by Alderman Thompson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All in favor, please raise your right hand. That is unanimous. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for joining us this evening.